Okay, all set.
Thank you, sir. Well, with that, we're going to start the April 8th, 2021 meeting of the Downtown Development Authority for the City of Marquette. Becky, we'll just let you take note of roll call. I'm guessing, based off of our past, we'll have our other members jump on here as we get going. Have you heard from anyone that's going to be excused today?
I have not.
Okay.
And we're admitting Mark right now.
Perfect. If we need to at the end, we can always make a motion to excuse. We'll just move that towards the end, since seemingly almost every week we're having people jump on late just due to our technological differences here. So let's move to additions and approval of the agenda. Becky, do we have any additions?
We do not.
Okay. If we can get a motion, if you've all looked at the agenda, to approve, that would be great.
Make a motion, we approve the agenda. Ratajski.
We have a motion to approve. Can we get a second, please?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We will approve the agenda from last meeting. Public comment. I know we do have some people in the waiting room. Why don't we bring them in now and see if they want to speak or if they want to wait until.
Okay, we'll start with Sue Holiday.
Okay. Oh, hello, Sue. It looks like you just connected to audio. We're at our public comment. We are just wondering if you wanted to speak at this point. We have public comment at the end, or are you looking to speak on any of our new business or old business items?
I'm not sure she caught all of that.
Sue, can you hear her?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Are you looking to speak during public comment, or are you looking to speak on one of our agenda items?
I had not planned on speaking.
Oh, okay, you're just looking to watch?
I'm looking to watch because I've never been to a DDA meeting.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if you saw in the chat, but I posted the link to the YouTube stream, and that's where we asked the members of the public to watch the meeting.
Somehow the compatibility detail would not come through on my computer, so I'm not sure. I can get there.
Sure. I'm fine allowing Sue to stay on. We can just keep her muted if she wants to watch. That's totally fine.
Fair enough. Becky, do we want to bring in Dustin and Wes right now for public comment, or do you want to save them for the meeting, for the item, or?
Why don't we ask them what they would prefer?
Sure.
How's it going, guys? We're just wondering if you want to speak during public comment, or if you want to wait until your agenda item to kind of share what you got going on.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go first. So thanks for having us join. I'm here to provide any commentary, answer questions, or support.
How's it going, guys? We're just wondering if you want to speak during public comment, or if you want to wait until your agenda item to kind of share what you got going on.
Can you not hear me? You cannot hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay.
I think that was the YouTube stream going.
Oh, yeah, I do have it going at the same time. Thank you.
There's a bit of a delay.
I've got it paused now, so that should work. Yeah, the two virtual systems simultaneously is new to me. Yeah, I'm here to support the agenda items related to Ordock Brewing Company. So here to answer any questions or provide further information, but don't have any particular public comment outside of that.
Okay, great. Unless Dustin has something else to say, perfect. Thank you, sir. We'll move on, and we will speak to you guys once we get to your new business item. If we've all had a chance to take a look at the consent agenda. Oh, sorry, I guess I should ask, is there anyone else public comment wise?
No.
Didn't think so. So we'll move on. Consent agenda. If you've all had a chance to take a look at the minutes, the bills of approval, financial reports. Do we have any questions, or can I get a motion to approve?
Motion
move
to
on those.
approve. I'll support.
Okay, motion to approve from Jim and a support from Tony. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. We will approve that. Okay, getting the old business. Becky, Washington Street project update. Why don't you go ahead and speak on that a little bit?
Yes, I just wanted to provide a brief update on this project. It has gone out to bids by city engineering. And from my conversations with the city engineer, they've had their bid opening, and Aero Construction appears at this time to be the low bidder. I'm not aware if it's gone before the city commission for approval or not, but it's looking like that is a good chance to be our contractor for that particular project. They've done good work for the city in the past and for the DDA as well. The estimate came in just slightly higher than what we had figured, 4.5%, with the DDA's portion being roughly what we had anticipated it to be and what we had budgeted for at 197,496, and a total project cost of $614,547.
It is going in front of the commission Monday night.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Becky, just as a refresher, do you remember what our actual budgeted amount was for that?
I believe it was about 195,000, so it's within just a couple thousand of what we had anticipated.
It's awesome.
Also, I'm pleased because our weather at this point in time looks as though we will be able to start as anticipated right away in May. So just as a reminder, we plan on starting May 3rd, and with a rather aggressive construction schedule, are looking to be done within 5 to 6 weeks by mid-June. So at this point in time, full steam ahead.
Beautiful. Board, any questions for Becky? I'll take that as a no. Let's go ahead and move on to our new business then. Becky, thank you for the update on that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, bond refunding. That's seems to be an important item of discussion. Why don't you touch some base on that?
Yes, we've spoken at the executive committee level and at the board level about the possibility of refunding our existing bond that we had issued in 2011. It was 1.5 million at the time. We have 750,000 remaining on our principal balance. We have pursued that possibility and have had some positive outcomes from those conversations. We will be able, because the bond is callable, we will be able to pursue a refunding should the board decide to do that. And what we're looking at as far as terms would be paying off the remaining balance of 750, or refunding that remaining balance. And then we had discussed as a board also wrapping $250,000 in our Bluff Street ramp repair project into that new bond issue as well, and extending the term from the remaining 5 years that we currently have, extending by 2 years for a 7-year term. We have been provided an interest rate of 2.45%, which is significantly lower than what we're currently paying at the 4.35%. So definitely an attractive opportunity to pursue. So at this point in time, I've been working with bond counsel and with RW Baird, who's our placement agent, and Baird is preparing for us a set of numbers right now so we can see, what the payments would look like, the amortization schedule, and bringing back some more firm numbers for the board to consider at our next meeting, at which point, if we decide to move forward with this initiative, we would be able to do it relatively quickly within a couple of weeks.
Awesome.
So Eric's been working with me on this. I don't know if you have anything to add, Eric.
Not much outside of what you said, Becky. I just think it's a good thing to look at this point, shaving almost 2% off those bonds and potentially being able to fund that ramp project without adding too many years to the bond. So I think it's definitely an attractive offer to look at.
Any other questions, guys? Comments? Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Becky, for that. Let's move on to the Ordock Brewing Company purchase request. Becky, if you could give us some background on all of that, and then we'll bring in Wes and Dustin so they can kind of give us some more background.
Sure. Okay, so just to kick off the conversation, Ordock Brewing Company / Ordock Real Estate is interested in purchasing from the city the strip of green space located directly behind their property. So behind Ordock, between that and the parking lot that is now owned by Veridia, but formerly owned by Flagstar Bank. If you can picture where it is, it fronts off of Front Street to the west. They are looking to develop that into a green space, beer garden, to expand their outdoor seating capacity and really utilize an underutilized space, and to create kind of that park-like feel for the community. We met as city staff, and Mike was part of that meeting as well, to discuss the possibility, and a couple of concerns were brought up as far as a storm water pipe being underground there, as well as there being an easement for the Peninsula Fiber Network, fiber optic cables. So it's my understanding that city staff was reaching out to Ordock property owners to address those concerns. Otherwise, there seemed to be general support for the idea, but of course we wanted to bring it before the DDA board for your discussion, consideration, and approval to support this sale.
Thank you, Becky. Before I go to Wes and Dustin, does anyone have any questions for Becky?
So I have a question, Mr. Chairman, Tony. This is a purchase, a request to purchase, not a request to lease, right?
That's correct.
Okay, I thought I read somewhere in the board packet that it said lease, but okay, I'm good, thanks.
Thanks, Tony. Anyone else? Great. So Wes and Dustin, why don't we allow you guys to talk now? Just give us some more info on everything and kind of go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Tony, to expand on your question a little bit, we do currently lease the sidewalk and entry platform that is on, and it's an annual lease. And I would be misguided if I didn't say that that's part of our request to purchase. Is we want to make sure that we take the steps necessary to ensure long-term access to our business. That is our ADA compliant access to our second story, which during normal years is a significant portion of our revenue and our business operation. Of course, it wasn't in 2020, but we want to make sure that we consider what hopefully a return to more normal operation looks like. And we want to make sure that we have a long-term access to that ADA access. Beyond that, we saw over the summer, over 2020, we really expanded our outdoor use, thanks quite a bit to the I would say, relaxation of the requirements by both the city, the DDA, and the state MLCC. And we saw massive attention and traction from it. I think it's something we've always suspected as a community and an organization, that people love Marquette and they love the outdoors. They want to combine the two. We've always been a little contained because of our particular location, that we don't have a lot of opportunity to always expand our outdoor seating. That little kind of what I would call a trial due to the environment that we were in 2020 really showed us that there is a need, there is a demand, and there's an opportunity. Not only that, we think that space, as Becky mentioned, being underutilized, we can convert it into an area that really just helps promote the placemaking and the draw of the downtown, some of the key initiatives of both the Brownfield and the DDA and the city. I think we can help make it an attraction that people look forward to. It's comfortable, it's inviting, it's non-exclusive. It's open to whomever wants to use it in appropriately, conducted manners. So I guess that would be my background. You will see the plans that we put in with our recent proposal are actually from 2008. That was the first draft that we created some time ago. We actually got pretty far. Some of you remember, I'm sure Mike, you remember, we got to the point of getting city commission approval to buy the property prior. At that time, financially and just with what was going on, it didn't make sense for us. Now we're in a different place and we want to take the step to make sure that the time is right for us to go forward and seek a purchase of that space.
Thanks, Wes.
Any questions or clarifications I can provide?
Go ahead, Mike.
Wes, did you mention Brownfield in some?
Yeah,
context?
yeah, we had been talking to them as it relates to potentially seeking purchase of a different property. And this became part of that discussion, as they may, just because it was relevant or there's natural, maturation of conversation. But towards what you're thinking, Mike, in this particular application, there wouldn't be brownfield available because it's already been remediated.
Right. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things. One, I don't remember talking about this at the DDA board level when there was a maybe years ago when this was going to purchase and the city commission approved it. So, and that part doesn't matter to me too much. I'm totally in favor of this project for this company. I think it's a great idea, and to have better utilization of that space back there. Plus, it's their entryway for those that need that special entrance, can't do the stairs and whatnot. But my question is the process that comes to the DDA board, we say that we approve this or not approve it for that matter, and then not go to the city commission? I guess is it just because it's going through the DDA board because it's a downtown piece of property? Is that the process here?
Yeah,
we seem to do two things is what I'm getting at. Sometimes it goes to the DDA board.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that it seems like in recent time where we've kind of hoped, and coming from Mike, and Mike can add to this, I think it's Mike has kind of hoped to get that support from the DDA on these projects. And I think that's kind of where we're at with this. I don't know that it's necessarily an approval thing. It's more of we're looking to support this. That way, when Mike goes to city commission, he could say, this is something that's supported by the DDA. Do I have that right, Mike? Does that seem about?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think when it went to the commission the first time, you weren't on the board, Tony.
No, Tony, that was before you were on the board.
2015.
Okay, thanks.
And yeah, I'm obligated to bring it to the commission no matter what. I'd prefer to have the DDA support. They will ask if there's DDA support. If there isn't, I will tell them that, and they will use that in their decision-making process. But, from my perspective, it would be helpful that to me, and I think to the commission, to know that this board looked at it and either gave it a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
I think if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, not to rush it along or anything, but just for the sake of discussion, I would make a motion that we approve this project, or at least encourage the city commission to approve this project as a DDA board member.
I'd like to support that motion.
So we do have a motion and support on the floor. Motion from Tony, support from Nicole. Any further discussion on this, board members, before we vote? Tony, anything else you want to say? Nicole?
No, I see Mike was raising his hand, though he might have a question or a concern.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to make a comment that as part of the process that I'm going through with the city, I'm reaching out to the surrounding businesses to make sure that there's no last minute objection to this. I can't remember, Becky, if we talked about talking to the Montclarys or not, but I'm guessing once they get a hold of this information, they're gonna, we maybe all don't know the Montclarys, but I think there could be some issues. So I'm trying to prepare this in a way that we have a lot of these issues resolved before I bring it to the commission. Not that one related business or surrounding business can stop the process, but they can certainly, if we're not prudent, can give the commission pause. And I personally support it as well. I think it's makes sense. And just for clarification, this does not include that abutment that is basically holding up the Montclair wall. So from my perspective, they really shouldn't have any objection to this because that's their main focus, I think. That's all. Thank you.
Anybody else want to make a comment before we vote on this motion? Okay, so we do have a motion to support the Ordock Brewing Company purchase request. All those in favor say aye, please. Aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? Great. Wes, Dustin, looks like you have full support from the DDA on this. I can
Thank
say
you.
that
Appreciate it.
as a person that spent thousands of dollars at the Ordock, I look forward to you getting that thing built so we can possibly enjoy some outdoor beers sooner rather than later.
Thanks, Jeremy.
No problem.
And
I guess-
before we move on,
Yeah.
if I could just bring up one other subject here as far as Ordock, while we still have Dustin and Wes with us. So in addition to the potential property purchase in the back, they are also looking to expand some outdoor seating on the front of their property. They currently have a sidewalk cafe permit, or traditionally have for the last several years, through the city clerk's office. And they will be applying for such again for this year. They're looking to expand, however, in a wider area across their property. And in addition to having outdoor seating and some planters, they're also looking to construct a semi-permanent pergola type structure made out of timbers over the top. I have spoken with city staff about this because the city sidewalk cafe permit does just account for the seating and planters, but nothing more structural. So anything beyond that, so essentially that pergola structure would require additional licensing through the city. I understand it would have to go through a planning and zoning process and then be presented to the city commission. So again, at this point, I don't know that there's any approval needed from the DDA necessarily. I just wanted to bring it to your attention that this is also in the works, and to address any concerns that you might have. And Dustin can speak to some of those as well. So we would open it up to questions on that at this point.
I guess I'll start with a question since I'm front and center. Do you know, are you guys going to require it, being that this is going to be, sounds like a semi-permanent structure, based on your district, are you going to require some sort of variance request on this?
Dustin, I can speak to that unless you feel that you really want to. You know, Jeremy, it kind of started with us. We didn't know, so we started the conversation. Dustin and Chris from our team started the conversation with Becky and Tara to kind of get the feedback like we just heard, so that we could understand what is it that we need to do. You know, it's semi-permanent in concept. I sketched some drawings of what was in my mind. It's semi-permanent context that it connects to our building, and then the planters where the posts come down would be in the stamped concrete section. If for those of you who are familiar with the sidewalk in front of our building, we have a full typical sidewalk. Then we have the stamped concrete that the city and the DDA has done throughout the downtown. And then we have the bike path. That stamped concrete already has typical obstructions in it, be it benches, light poles, bike racks. And so these planters would be positioned where the post of the structure comes down. They would not modify city property in any way, but they would not be removed on a nightly basis, which is where you get into the cafe language, gets a little, I think, confusing, or where are you walking that line? So it sounds like after Becky's discussion with the city, it looks like we need to make sure that we include a formal permit process and not just use the cafe process.
That's correct. And one other piece of feedback I received from the city clerk as well, as far as the verbiage of that sidewalk cafe ordinance, is that it would apply, your permit would apply only to your the piece of your property that's currently occupied by Ordock. So your current space, and then to the east where the Ameriprise office formerly was, that would be able to be included, but the area that was the sewing shop or the hair salon would not be able to be included within that structure.
Okay, that's manageable. I mean, that's not a deal breaker. But so, Jeremy, I guess to answer your question specifically, I don't think we know yet. We'll have to start the process.
No doubt. Any other questions for Wes or Dustin, guys?
Jeremy, I have a question that it looks like it doesn't, from what the drawings, the conceptual drawings that were sent to us, it doesn't look like it changes the footprint of something that they already have there. Is that correct?
Well, what Becky was mentioning is on the west side, there are some business suites that we don't currently, Ordock Brewing Committee doesn't pay rent Ordock real estate for. So the concept I drew with the structure does extend the full width of the building. The sidewalk cafe itself and in front of those businesses, I should say in front of the storefront and the doors of those businesses and the apartments. And that's kind of where we're, you know, how does this process have to go forward and what do we have to get permit approval for? What's under the sidewalk cafe?
What I was getting at is it doesn't go any further south and it still allows for ADA compliance going around the structure from the conceptual drawings that you sent.
Mm-hmm. And there would be passageways through it, is typical that we saw over last summer that we see at some other businesses in the area.
Okay, thanks.
And I would add that that particular location is unique in that it does have the traditional sidewalk area and then the bike path immediately in front of it. So there is a wider space there than we would normally have on our sidewalks downtown.
Definitely, which is nice to have.
Anybody else? Great. Awesome. Well, I don't think we have any other questions for you guys.
Well, thank you for the time. Appreciate your attention.
Good luck with all your projects. I know downtown Marquette sure looks forward to it for sure.
Cheers.
Take care. Okay, Becky, let's go to Spinway MQT LLC lease agreement.
Okay, so we have another request before us, and this one is for an automated bike rental facility. It would be one of those if you've seen in other communities with bikes there available for rent by entering your credit card, using the bike for your chosen period of time, and then returning the bike to that bike corral. So we have a local couple, Pete Dukes and Brooke Barabee, who are operating Spinway MQT LLC. They are looking to install one of these units, and they would like to do it on a piece of public property. And that property is located adjacent to the Lakeshore parking lot between the bike path and Lakeshore Boulevard. If you can picture like where the interpretive signage is for the Ordock, just to the south of that particular signage. They would be looking to fully operate and maintain and install and then take down this particular unit outside of their hours or not their hours, but outside of their months of operation. So what we're proposing is to allow them to lease this piece of property. I've been currently drafting up a lease. It's unique in that the city owns the property. They own the building they own the business, and then the DDA manages that property. So there are three entities involved in this particular agreement, as opposed to just a lessor and a lessee. So I'm working with the city attorney to determine how we would approach that agreement, but it would be my intention to keep the rental fees for the DDA, as we would be the ones managing, any oversight of this facility. I did include a copy of a presentation that was provided by the business owner. If you've all had a chance to look at that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions on that and any questions on this particular request.
Yeah, Mike, you go first.
Just a comment. This would also need commission approval once it gets past this stage, because it's city right away that's being used. So Tony, this is another one of those situations where you're not the final say. I'm sorry. Just wanted
That's
to put,
okay. I understand
put
it.
that out there.
I understand it. And I'm glad that we're not the final say on some of these issues.
I hear you. Anyone else want to make a question or comment for Becky?
I have maybe sort of both. So I think the idea is really cool. And I think that it would be really great for a lot of the summer tourists and visitors and maybe even locals who don't have a bike of their own. But I was slightly concerned with the preferred location, because as someone that uses the bike path in the summer, it can get quite busy. And then when we do have festivals at the Lower Harbor, that Ordock parking lot is usually full. And so there is a lot of traffic and pedestrian and stuff, and crossing those walkways. And so I was just curious for their structure that's going to hold these bikes and the accessibility of getting the bike in and out. Would that kind of create some confusion to others on the bike path, or would it, I guess I'm not sure the right word I'm looking for, but is that location, do you guys think that's an ideal location, or do you think that it would create kind of like a little bit of a cluster with people trying to get bikes in and out?
Go ahead, Becky.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. I think generally speaking, on a given day, it wouldn't be an issue. Perhaps on some of those more festival days that you're mentioning,
Yeah.
there would definitely be more activity around there. But I would think overall it shouldn't interfere with really operations on the bike path.
Okay.
Can I add to that? Excuse me.
Sure.
I think their overall plan also is to put other stations around the city so that you don't actually have to bring the same bike back to the same location. And then one more thing, that here nor there, I think they live right there too, live across the street, and they can kind of keep an eye on it. And that's part of the location appeal to them.
Gotcha.
as well.
Looking at the map where they have their preferred location, it's right next to the bike path, where the two alternate locations are kind of on the side a little bit, or kind of in a corner. I think those corner areas might be just a little bit better of a location, just so that when people are trying to get the bikes off and on the racks, they're not actually in the middle of the bike path trying to do that. They're actually on the grass or on the curb.
Yeah, I can't speak to that as to what's better. That green space they're talking about is somewhat, it's wider than the area that's between the bike path and the curbing. And I don't know, Becky, are the bikes on both sides of the rack or just on one side of the rack so that the bikes could be facing the parking lot? Do you know that kind of detail?
They would just be on one side. I would imagine that they would have the bikes facing the bike path.
Yeah, I mean, as an alternative, we could ask them to face the parking lot. I don't know.
Becky, I have a question for you. Do you know, is this more of a startup spot? Are they thinking in the future of possibly adding to this? Because the reason I say this to me seems like a strikingly decent business idea. And given what we have in Marquette and just the tourist demand for something like this, I think it's something that could kind of explode if done right. There could be quite a bit of demand, much like kayaks over in Munising for it. So I'm kind of curious what your discussions have been with them.
Yes, this would be kind of their trial location. And if it did prove to be successful, they would have additional locations throughout the city that they would look to pursue, such as down at Matson Park or Tourist Park, or potentially at the Commons, were a few that they've mentioned. And I should mention too, I forgot to say this earlier, but this particular unit would just be installed during the summer months or a designated time period. So right now we're talking May through October, and then it would be taken down in the winter so as to not interfere with snow removal at all.
Okay.
And that would be at their expense as well. And they would be responsible for actually doing that.
There's also an option for them to use private property. I mean, a lot of these that exist in other cities are private lots. They may go down that route as well, but I mean, I appreciate Nicole's comments, but I don't see that quite as a big a problem. And I would say that if we do this 1 year, first year, it does become an obvious problem. This is probably going to be, we're talking about an annual renewal, right, Becky? We're not talking about we talking about a 3-year contract or something, or?
As it's drafted right now, we're looking at 3 years, but like I said, it's just in the initial phases. So we could certainly propose 1 year if that's what we feel is more.
Well, it might help to propose 1 year for the first time, and then if it comes back up as a success, maybe the DDA consider approving it for a 3-year extended periods after the 1 year trial.
Yeah, or you could include a
Good idea.
clause to say that you're going to review after 1 year, and if there's any changes that are necessary to be made, there's a review period.
Just as long as we have a simple opt-out. Go ahead, Tony.
I agree with Nicole in the opportunity for a little bit of congestion, but if you look at the alternate locations that they proposed, I'm concerned about, automobile and personnel being mixed together on those corners where they would turn into the parking lot from either end. I think the location that they have as a trial period would be great. I don't know that there would be a group that would say, well, if you're only going to give me 1 year, I'm not going to do this proposal. I think it's a great proposal for our downtown district to have those bikes. I know the city attempted this many years ago. I think it was the city, maybe it was DDA. We had bicycles, but this is a little more regulated, timed, and I think it would be a great idea. So I'm good, a little bit cautious about what Nicole said during our heavier times that it's being used during festivals. And if we face the parking lot with the bike racks, there'll be cars parked there if it's during the festival time. So I'd say let's take a look at this preferred location, move forward, and allow them to at least try it, see what happens. I think it's really cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. I guess the one thing we need to make sure we're mindful of is it's really ultimately the business that's taking the liability on here. It's not the city or the DDA. At least as far as I'm concerned, even though we may be leasing property to them, ultimately the sole responsibility of running their business is on them. So go ahead, Becky.
And to that point, Jeremy, that would be required as part of the lease agreement that they would provide the appropriate insurance and list the DDA and the city as additional insured on that policy. And I should also mention, because I know the board, hopefully the board is aware that there is some deed restrictions on that particular property through the Bay Association from years ago. So I have requested Mr. Dukes to provide in writing from Wim McDonald, who is representing the Bay Association, that they have no issues and that they approve this particular use, just to avoid any potential problems down the road.
Smart.
And just as a last comment from me, the bike program Tony was referring to, the previous one was the yellow bike program, and I think the DDA might have been doing, I don't know, but it proved to be great dive practice for the police dive team. Because most of those bikes ended up in the lake.
Well, and the difference now would be that people's credit cards are tied to the usage of the bike. So if it doesn't get returned, then it would likely get charged to that particular user, but that's not our concern. That would be the business owner's concern.
I think there's still one of those yellow bikes in Mike Angeli's garage, if I remember right. So, well, at this point, I guess unless there's further discussion, I'd be looking to probably have someone make a motion to support this. Sounds like we're all kind of in favor of it.
Could I say one other thing?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
The rental rate that I'm proposing is $500 annually. So if we just did the 1-year lease, it would just be the $500, obviously. But if we did the 3-year, then I would look for 3 payments of $500 for $1,500 total. Does that sound fair?
Does to me.
Yep.
More than fair.
Yeah.
That seems, yeah. I think it seems kind of low, but I don't know, it's just me. But, and I would be hesitant, I am hesitant with the 1-year lease because it seems like it would be a big investment for them to buy this system and all these bikes and everything and just have one, it's not even 1 year, it's 1 summer. So that, I don't know if that's, it seems like it's
I
kind
agree
of
with
unfair to
Megan.
that business to ask them to put that investment into the community with only guaranteed 1 summer.
I think it would be fair to put something in the contract, like Nicole mentioned, that after 1 year review, but keep in mind that if it's a mess, we may have to, there's a risk. I mean, we may cancel it if it proves to be a problem for the DDA. I'm not saying it is, but you know, if a lot of these issues do come up, I mean, we also need to have the ability to say, hey, we can't do this here. We've got to do it somewhere else, or we've got to do it differently. So it's 99% chance it'll be fine, or 99.9. But I think we also need an out, though. And they can have an out too. I mean, if they, after the 1 year, if they want to pull out and go somewhere else, they should have that option as well.
We could include that in the lease, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I think that's been a good discussion. Does someone want to get crazy and propose a motion with how this should be written up?
Didn't somebody just do that? Didn't you just do that, Tony? Did we have a motion, or was I dreaming?
I think you're dreaming.
We didn't quite get to that point yet.
I will make that motion then that we agree to the lease with I would like to have the language that we have a 3-year lease with a 1-year review on location. If that's sufficient for the rest of our board.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion and support. I saw Megan first. Any further discussion, Tony?
No.
Megan? Okay. Well, at this point, we're going to take a vote for Spinway MQT LLC. Becky, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Before we vote, I just want to clarify what the motion is as far as allowing me to negotiate this lease, and am I allowed to execute it, or does the board want to see the actual lease come back before them?
I would amend my motion that we allow the executive director to execute a lease with Spinway.
Once the commission approves, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
With support of the commission. Okay. So.
To second that again.
Yeah, you just did. You're fine. So basically, just to recap, we have a motion and support for full support of Becky to negotiate a lease with Spinway MQT, and the DDA support to move it on to Marquette City Commission approval. Okay. All those in favor of that motion say aye, please.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Thank God. Let's go ahead and move on.
I want to ask a question though. Is Jim alive? Because he hasn't moved in like the last 45 minutes.
He's there.
Okay.
We're going to get to our last item of new business, which is TIF discussion. I know Becky and I and everyone else has had a lot of conversation regarding this, and it sounds like she's got some info.
Yes, I would love to get started on this initiative. I have reached out to a colleague from Dearborn, to Christina Shepard-Decius, and she is the DDA director for Dearborn. She also is the president of POW Strategies, which is a consulting firm. She does organizational, economic, communication services. She's also very knowledgeable and very experienced in TIF. In fact, I had attended one of her presentations at a Michigan Downtown Association where she spoke specifically on TIF and renewals and creating of TIF districts. So I have reached out to her to see if she would be willing to present to the board just some general information about TIF, what we need to consider with this particular initiative moving forward, and some tips for doing that expeditiously. And she has agreed to do that. I would like to propose a special meeting so that we can give it the attention it deserves and focus on that particular issue. If it's pleasing to the board, I would propose we meet 2 weeks from now, Thursday morning, April 22nd at 8 a.m. And that date is available through Christina as well.
Okay. Board, how does that sound? I know as far as I'm concerned, that is good timing. How is it for everyone else?
Good.
Thanks, Mark. Good, Megan. Okay.
Good. Rebecca, do you know about how
Thanks,
long
Eric.
we're allotting for that meeting?
Thanks,
I
Tony.
would say an hour.
Okay. I'm good.
Oh, good. So it looks like we're all good. Jim, you're okay with that that Thursday? Jim?
Who? Me? Yes.
Yeah, you.
Checking.
Just making sure.
Checking.
What was the
Okay.
time again, Becky?
8 a.m.
Next Thursday?
No, 2 weeks from
Thursdays.
now,
2 weeks.
the 22nd.
Okay, I can probably do that too.
Well, it sounds like we can all be there, except maybe Mike, but he's not going to be here long anyway, so he doesn't need to learn about this as much as the rest of us do, I guess. So let's go ahead.
Wait,
and
I want to stick around to vote no on it.
Of course you do. We'll probably have to hear from you in public comment at that point.
Yeah, I'm coming.
Well, I don't think we need to vote on that, do we? To schedule a special meeting? Perfect. Okay, go ahead and put it on the books then.
Okay, and I would encourage you, if you guys have any particular questions that you want her to address in that presentation, if you could email them to me ahead of time and I can forward them to her so she can prepare.
Yeah, Becky, if you could just email the board too to remind that.
Sure.
I think that's a great point. That way she's not flying blindly. Perfect. Okay, let's go to committee reports. Looks like we have some old business on here as well. Business Development and Promotions Committee. I know they met, discussed our flag policy, everything else. If we could hear some background on that and kind of where those discussions have led us.
Okay, you want me to speak to that?
Why don't we let Megan speak to that first? Why don't you speak to the Business Development and Promotions Committee meeting?
Okay. Yeah, so we met to discuss the flag policy and then specifically the Rainbow Pride application. So the committee recommends approving the Rainbow Pride application based on the current policy because after looking at, I know there was a lot of confusion in the last meeting about what the policy actually said, but like once you like put it out, like print it out and like actually read through it, it does meet the policy as written. So it would be our recommendation to approve it. But then after further discussion, we wanted to bring it back to the board about if this, putting up flags for events, if it's something that the board would like to continue to do. In that case, we would want to modify the policy a little bit just to add some clarification to it. Or if it's something that you don't want to continue to do, and then we wouldn't have to spend the time modifying the policy.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Megan. Nicole, weren't you part of that meeting as well?
I was actually absent from that meeting. I was out of town.
Well, what the heck?
But I do support approving the request as it meets the qualifications of the current policy. And I personally would like to see the DDA continue to hang flags and banners. I think it's a great show of the supports that go on in the district, and, you know, brings a little fun and heart to downtown. But I do think that there should be some things that we look at as far as rewriting the policy and maybe raising the fee to cover the maintenance costs and the time that maintenance spends on that. So I think those would be some good conversation starters.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Nicole. Mark or Rob, weren't one of you guys there as well? Am I missing that? Or Eric even? Mark, why
Yeah,
don't you-
I was
Okay.
certainly there, part of it. I mean, I think Megan's right. You know, we certainly looked at that existing application, and based on the current policy, basically decided that we should or need to approve that one. But I think the further discussion, you know, is what we're looking to do going forward with that. And I, correct me if I'm wrong, Becky, but I think we kind of came to the point to where we wanted to come back to the board with this. We had some lengthy discussion on what may or may not be included in a new policy, and really to some extent came to an impasse amongst all of us. You know, just a lot of variables to consider with the dynamics of the world we live in today. And, you know, we're trying to put together a policy that, you know, if someone applied, you could kind of go down and just check yes or no, and does it fit the bill or not? And there was a lot of gray area out there. And over the course of a couple meetings and several hours, I don't know that we got any closer to what a new policy should look like. And kind of wanted to come back to the board and say, hey, is this something we should even continue to spend more time on? Or with all the dynamics out there, is this something we should just say, hey, the DDA is not in the business of this and doesn't want to get in the middle of it? And I think that's kind of where we're back to today is, you know, a group consensus of, do we want to continue to do this? And if so, should we spend some more time and effort on trying to look at a new policy? Or do we just kind of want to get out of this business as a whole? So from my perspective, that's kind of where it sits at this point.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Mark, why don't you go ahead and speak to what you had from that?
Yeah, everything that Eric just said was exactly right. I mean, there is no perfect policy that can be written that is going to cover all situations at all times.
Okay.
There's definitely improvement can be made on the current policy as it sits. Number of things that we talked about is increasing fees and making it very clear in the verbiage about what exactly would be allowed. But yeah, it's improvement can be made, but it's not going to be perfect. And we're just wondering, should we continue that discussion?
Okay. Rob, were you part of that too, or I can't remember?
No, I was not.
Okay, sorry about that. Well, Becky, why don't you speak a little further on that if you can?
Sure. Well, my thoughts on it are several. It was very productive conversation both times, very lively conversation. I know that there was a lot of talk about the sense of place that the flags provide. And I do agree that they do provide that kind of additional festivity, I guess, for lack of a better word. I personally think that we as a DDA are already doing that ourselves through display of the American flags, the NMU flags for various northern events, with the flower baskets that we're hanging and the holiday baskets and the seasonal decorations. In my mind, we're already providing that without having external flag displays. And
Okay.
so I would look to continue doing that and maybe other DDA initiated displays as opposed to continuing with the application process for external applicants. That's my own personal thought on that particular issue. I do agree with much that's been said here as far as the inability to create a universally applicable policy to every circumstance that we could come before us. And I don't think that a policy would necessarily alleviate the need for us to look at each application on a case-by-case basis and potentially come back to the board to have these same conversations over and over. I definitely think moving forward that the DDA should remain neutral to any type of highly charged, political, racial, religious, sexual orientation, like any of those types of issues. I don't feel it's the DDA's place to take a stance one way or another. And I would hope that we could remain neutral on that. I know that we have had some businesses boycotted or protested against because of their stance on sensitive issues. And I don't think that we should be inviting that type of situation into our downtown and into our business environment. So my personal thought on it, also given the fact that some of the issues that came up in our conversation were, okay, with the policy as it is, what type of event is considered an event? We went around and around on that quite thoroughly. What would qualify as an event? How would we define that? What type of time frame would be beneficial or worth it for our maintenance staff to be putting up and taking down the flags? And how long should we be putting them up? And would that potentially interfere with our existing flag hanging schedule, the American flags and the Northern and everything that I just mentioned earlier? So, I mean, given all those variables, my personal thought is that we should just continue with what we're doing DDA display wise and discontinue the external applications.
Okay. Lot of comment here. This is yeah, Mike, go ahead.
I just want to make 2 points.
Sure.
And I did this before. And you have to remember that the DDA is an authority. Okay. I mean, that has to be your baseline. And that whatever you propose, whether you propose a policy, especially if you propose a policy, it has to be inclusive, all inclusive. I mean, we're not a private entity where we can exclude one group because we don't like it, or something like that. So I'm wholeheartedly behind Becky's recommendation that you just stick with what we have and stay away from this, because there was a time probably when this wouldn't have been a big deal, right? But now everybody wants to have their particular priority, agenda, whatever, displayed. And I mentioned this at the last meeting, where it may be very appropriate to put up these flags that are being requested. There's going to come a time when you're going to get a flag request from somebody that you may not want, but because you're a public entity, you have to honor that. And I think that's where you need to protect yourself. I mean, you need to take the ideology out of it. You need to take the preference out of it. You need to take all of that away out of it and just say, whatever we do, we have to take the good with the bad, or the bad with the good. And that's where I run into issues. And I honestly agree that our current policy, now that you look at it, is, I don't know that I agree that this one meets the qualifications. I didn't look at it, but I think with, anybody could move into the downtown area. Anybody could have an event in the downtown area. And then if they want to put a flag up, what if somebody lives downtown and they're having a birthday party for their son, and they want to put flags up on the poles to commemorate their child's birthday? I mean, technically that might meet the policy, but it might not be something that's the DDA's mission or the authority's mission. And I just want to make sure that you need to think about what protecting yourself into the future, protecting the DDA, and remembering or recalling that you represent the public and not just your own personal opinions. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I'd like to make a couple comments at the time. In reviewing the policy, which I've done quite a bit now, since this has been a very popular topic of discussion, I don't think the policy is well written. And I think the proof in the pudding is we're sitting here discussing different things right now and interpreting different things. We have one person saying, well, I think it meets. We have another person saying, I don't think it meets. I think we need to have a little bit more clarification on it. And getting back to what Mark said, I think overall, I think it's a good policy. It's a good baseline, but it can be added to. We need to kind of determine as an organization, do we want, to allow for flags, piggybacking off of Nicole? A lot of people love seeing flags and supporting downtown. And if there's a festival going on, that's bringing business into our local businesses. So I think there needs to be just more discussion with this. Obviously, we're not a political organization. We want to stay away from anything to do with politics. That being said, I think the discussion of pride is not a political discussion. This is 2021. Pride is an all-inclusive thing. Everybody is basically included in that. I don't know that, if we're upsetting a business owner by saying we're putting pride flags up, guess what? Me as a consumer, I may not want to support that business. I don't know. I think that's one of those things that, we as a board also need to be mindful of. People look at things differently in 2021. That being said, not everybody, but totally true. That being said, when it comes to the pride flag request for 2021, I believe, as Eric, Megan, and Becky have kind of pointed out, our events or business development and promotions, they came to the recommendation of approving that flag request based on how the policy is written currently. At this point, is there a motion for that, or is that something that we're going to move on, and then obviously we can further discuss flags down the future? But I'd kind of like to move on from the flag discussion for 2021, since they did put the request in before our last meeting.
I'd motion to approve it.
Okay.
I'll support that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the Pride Fest flag request, as we had on our last meeting, based on how the current policy is written. Do we have any further comment on this before we make a vote on it? Mike, go ahead.
Question.
We'll go to Mike first. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can someone just explain to the group how or why you think it meets the current policy?
Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
You can't right now. I'm sorry, Sue. Eric, go ahead and explain how you guys came to the.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, it wasn't. We probably talked about this for 2-3 hours now over the past couple of weeks. Certainly, I think there were differing opinions there. I think the big question or mark or not for us was whether it was truly an event or not. A procession or a parade going through downtown, is that truly an event, like a 3-day festival at Lower Harbor or something of that nature, and what constitutes an event? There was some differing opinions on that, but ultimately the consensus of the group was that it was an event, and essentially based on the current policy, that it met that criteria of them having an event downtown. And I guess it basically came down to as whether you agree or not with the current policy and how it is. Ultimately, the consensus it was an event downtown, and that's how it qualified.
What about the location in the DDA as far as the business? That's one of the qualifications, isn't it?
The resident.
It's like an or qualification from the way it was interpreted. You have to have a business downtown, or the event has to be downtown.
Yeah, I don't recall an or. Sorry.
If you just pull up the policy and read through it instead of talking about it, I think it's very clear because that it meets the policy.
I confess I haven't read it recently, and I admit that, but if I pull it up here, I'm going to screw up something and all you guys will be gone. So
the policy, just to clarify, there are numerous bullet points in the policy, but there definitely is an or in there. And getting back to, if you think about in the past, we've allowed other organizations, to request this that have had addresses in the downtown. One of our other discussions we had, at our previous meeting was if a PO box was sufficient or it needed to be a physical address. If you remember that from our previous discussion, that way we were trying to figure out if that's a way to alleviate this issue. So it's definitely in there.
But this is a PO box, right?
Correct.
And the policy does state right now that it has to be a business or nonprofit with a physical address within the DDA district.
There you go.
And I guess from my comments on it personally, as the group, we did talk about it. I don't, whether it's event downtown, whether it's truly an event, I don't know. I don't know that I personally agree with it, but I get based on the current policy, while that's what we have when these people applied. But I'm supportive of Becky's comments on moving forward, that and really yours too, Mike. That going forward, there's just a lot of gray area, a lot of slippery slope, and I don't know that the DDA wants to be in the middle of that. But I was also supportive of the Pride one, and based at the criteria at the time they applied, I think that's what we have to judge them by. But moving forward, I think we need to consider just kind of not doing this anymore.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead. Go ahead if you got something to say.
Just a question again, maybe for you, Jeremy. How are we going to proceed after this? Are we going to take Eric's comments to heart? Are we going to move ahead with considering not doing this anymore? Because my total discomfort is setting precedents. I mean, my total discomfort with this thing is, I'm not worried about Pride Parade at all. I'm worried about setting precedents without dealing with this after the fact. It would, I mean, if for example, we want to talk about what Eric proposed right after this, I'd be happy to support this particular motion, as long as I know we're going to put this to rest at some point in the near future. But if we're just going to push it off, and then, the next person that comes up and meets all the qualifications, but isn't something that's, likable, then we're not solving anything. So.
No, you're right. You're right on that, Mike. And I get it. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't think that we should be in the business of having to set precedents and make, decisions constantly, especially when it comes to whether or not we should be putting flags down. It seems like I said at the last meeting, it seems like a waste of time. It's something that I think that should solely be on the executive director should be able to make these decisions. And that's why the policy in my mind isn't appropriate, because we're having to discuss this for far too long at this point.
I know.
And basically what I have to say about, whether or not some sort of outside entity, some sort of hate group or whatever else wants to put a flag up, the last line in our current policy does say that it's at DDA discretion, right?
And that's where you get into trouble.
It is, but ultimately you have to hope that your board is, not going to allow some sort of hateful group or some sort of politically oriented group to want to put flags up. In the argument of a Pride festival or a concession downtown, my argument with all of this is, one, what is this doing for our downtown, putting the flags up? Is this bringing business in because there's a festival going on? That's been my discussion from the beginning of this. There's not really a festival going on. They're driving through downtown. So it's a lot of maintenance costs associated with that for not much give back to our business. Yes, we want to be a community that supports Pride and support all of that. But once again, what's the benefit for downtown in putting the flags up for this event? If there was the event going on at Lower Harbor, fully understand that. It's just so many discussions either way, gray area. And none of those discussions, mind you, are about whether or not the DDA supports Pride. Obviously we do. It has nothing to do with that.
You just reminded me of something that, Becky, we were in a meeting the other day that the Supreme Court has ruled that we, public entity, cannot control content. All we can control is if they can be up, where they can be up, how many can be up, but we can't control at all what that sign says. This goes back to yard signs, campaign signs, all this kind of stuff. And it's not that old of a decision. It probably was 3 years ago, maybe. So, to your comment that you hope that we wouldn't approve a hateful message, we may not have, you don't have a choice. I mean,
I know.
If you don't approve it, they may walk away, but there's going to be that one group that's going to come in and say, I'm going to sue your butts and you're going to lose. And, I just like to say, I'd like this group to decide today or soon that let's approve this today, but maybe with a caveat or maybe an amendment to this motion, or maybe another separate motion that we just not do this anymore for anybody except what's grandfathered. Maybe that's premature on my part, but I think that's going to make me feel better about what you're doing as far as allowing an outside group that and protecting your future. That's all.
Jim, go ahead.
I agree with Mike 100%. I think we should just let this go, let it happen. And then, from now on, not do anything. It's going to come to some point that, like, if we can't control what's on those flags, what if people start putting flags up there that don't look good or aren't right or have bad messages on them? We can't do anything about that. So rather than keep dealing with that and talking about this, which we've got better things to do than sit here and talk for a half hour about this. So that's my input, and I just want to let you know I have another appointment here at 9:30.
Me too.
I'm okay. I'm done talking. I'm sorry.
Well, I certainly appreciate all of the input, and I think it's Tony, was there something you wanted to say? I thought you had your hand up at one time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I did earlier. Great discussion, and it continues. A concern for me, and you danced around it, many of us have, but what if the next group that comes 2 weeks from now is an anti-Pride group and they meet the criteria? They set up whatever criteria is supposed to be. I think we should look at the policy. I do know, and I agree with this, and I plan on voting for this, for the flag, for the Pride group. But, a couple of years ago when the Masons came to town, they brought thousands in and occupied all the hotels, and we gladly put up those flags for them that they maybe designed or made or whatever. And they had a lot of positive comments about the flags from the people from out of town that came in. And so that's my support for the flags. The other concern that I have is if we just say we're not going to do this anymore, do we not do it for Northern, who really doesn't occupy the DDA, right? They don't have a physical address in the DDA that I know of, or other entities that we commonly do it for. I think don't we do this? Don't we put up flags for hockey? Or we did. I don't know if we still do. There was hockey sticks or something hanging up there. So I think we have to look at it. I don't know that I want to say we're just going to shut it down because we throw up our hands and give up because it's causing too much controversy. But I think we should look into it. But what I would feel really comfortable with is if we could get maybe the city attorney in a work session with us to talk about what we can and can't do. I agree, Mike. There's been some Supreme Court decisions, but and I don't know. I'd like to see those decisions, but they're hard to interpret sometimes. So maybe, and I don't know if we have to pay for the city attorney to talk to us for an hour on this or not.
Well, I can arrange the attorney. I can also arrange our community development director who deals directly with our signs and is the gatekeeper for all of those rules and decisions. So, yeah, we can.
It's worth it.
If we go in the future, I can do that. But
Okay.
No charge.
How about this? Why don't we go ahead and get a vote going for the flag request from the Pride Fest as it sits now, and then why don't we allow our business development promotions committee to meet again with the community promotions person or community development person, if Mike can get that set up. That way we can reevaluate the actual flag policy, because split down, if we look at it from the board standpoint, we all have different opinions on this, and I think ultimately we need to have a better policy in place that we can interpret. For me, it's more simplistic than that. It's, what are these flags doing for the downtown? Are we promoting downtown business by putting the flags up? When we have a festival or the Masons came in, we have thousands of people downtown that are supporting those businesses. If we have a festival that's going on for a day or 2 days, or the beer festival comes to town and wants to put flags up, beer flags down, are we going to say no to that? I mean, they're bringing in thousands of dollars to the community. I mean, come on, we have to think a little bit more in depth with this, in my opinion. And that's why I think it does warrant further discussion with our business development and promotions committee, especially if Mike can get that set up with somebody that's well-versed in that information. That way our committee can actually speak to those people, bring something back that we can really kind of set in stone. How does that sound to everyone?
Cool.
And with me.
Good. Perfect. Okay. So if I could, I did have a motion and support, I believe, for the Pride Fest flag request. Was it Megan that made the motion? Who made the second? I'm sorry.
Mark.
Thank you so much. So at this point, we're going to take a vote for the Pride Fest flag request for their concession parade, which is this year. All in favor of that flag request, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? Perfect. So the Pride Fest can get their flags put up, and we can move on from that discussion at this point. Becky, let's go ahead and get to our committee reports for parking committee at this point.
Okay, I'll just provide a brief update on that. We did have a parking committee meeting. It basically was just to provide some updates on our projects. We talked at length about the bond issue that we discussed earlier, as that does relate directly to parking and the Bluff Street ramp repairs. As far as the Bluff Street ramp repairs, I'm currently still waiting on the construction and bid documents from GEI. They're a bit behind schedule in that regard, so I'm going to have to see if I can hurry that along so we can get this project out to bids yet and do it at this late summer or fall. I'd definitely like to get it done before the end of this fiscal year. We also talked about our digital permitting. We had Mary Schlick from the Treasurer's Office, as well as Tara from the Treasurer's Office there to talk about what our digital permitting platform has done as far as affecting their revenues from tickets and violations, and also from the police department perspective, if they've seen any increase in violations, or just how it's going from all of the different stakeholders involved. And basically across the board, everybody said things are consistent with what they've seen in the past. And so I take that as a good sign that we've breached that transition and are well on our way now to continuing on with an more efficient parking permit system. So that was basically the gist of it. We did talk a little bit about our parking study and what recommendations we might be able to implement in the short term. One that came up was the Bluff Street parking ramp and allowing for overnight parking there beyond those that are permitted with the parking permits, but more for those who just may have overnight guests that need 1 or 2 nights, or people who need to park, if they've had too much to drink and need to leave their vehicle there overnight, allowing for them to do so via the pay stations and paying for that short-term overnight parking. So that's something that we're looking to do relatively quickly. We do have to evaluate the signage and if we need to modify the signage at all to reflect that change. And Was there anything else from anyone from the parking committee that I didn't touch upon?
Well, maybe I could add something I learned. I've always been in favor of the 3rd Street parking meters to keep the employees and others that want to park all day in front of businesses to circulate that traffic. But Rob informed us, and really something I didn't think about before, that he owns a couple of larger parking lots off of 3rd Street. And if we put meters up down there, it's going to fill up his parking lot. So his patrons can't go. So I think we have to look into things like that. And I know our initial discussions was to have parking meters on the south end or more southern end of 3rd Street. Talked about it then, but so I think that we have to make sure that we're being careful. And if Rob wasn't on this particular committee, we probably would be having more in-depth discussion about putting parking meters on 3rd. But now I think we have to think about that a little bit. So, or at least figure out how we're going to come up with a medium. I think there's opportunity for revenue, but at the same time, we have to make sure we're not creating another problem for ourselves. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Tony. Rob, do you want to touch more on that?
Yeah, one additional thing. I think if meters are all up and down 3rd, I hear from my neighbors, residents, all the time about parking issues, and I'd hate to make that situation worse. Frankly, I have people from businesses across the street that are parking next to my business, but on the street. And then I have residents complaining to me that it's employee parking and they can't park. So I think it's a little more complicated than just getting some additional revenue. So certainly merits more discussion. So.
Thanks, Rob. Anyone else want to touch base on parking? I love parking so much. That was a great discussion. That was a great discussion. Okay, Becky, why don't we go to your director's report then?
Okay, just a few things to mention. I know we're getting kind of lengthy here with our meeting. So I have been working with the auditor. She's nearly finished with our audit. I just wanted to point out that even though we did suffer COVID last year, and we saw losses in revenue in parking, in our promotions, in the farmers market, basically across the board, that we were able to tighten our belts, so to speak, and to reduce some of our expenditures and to defer some of the projects that we had planned on starting this past year. So in the end, we ended up with $16,000 worth of revenues over expenditures for the year. So I consider that a success, given the year that we just came out of, that we came out on the plus side. So I will present those audited financials probably at the next meeting as soon as I get all the paperwork from the auditor. Secondly, farmers market applications are coming in. We have 51 applicants so far. A number of them are interested in the Saturday market, not as many in the Wednesday market. So we'll see how that shakes out in the end. We do still have applications open until April 13th. So we have a few days left to see how that'll shake out. And I'll continue to update you as we know more. Staffing update, we did hire a new maintenance coordinator. His name is Jeff Steiner. He started last week and he's hit the ground running. He's getting the maintenance crew up to speed. He's implementing a lot of new processes and procedures. He's a former fire inspector, so he's been very diligent about making sure that we're up to all safety regulations as far as emergency lighting, any issues with our elevators, that type of thing. So I'm really looking forward to his leadership as far as maintenance and to the direction that we're going. He's also very knowledgeable with different types of construction projects. So I look forward to having him on board as we start this Washington Street project, and also as we are updating our signage. So moving things forward, and it's a new day in regard to maintenance. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention, if you guys recall, prior to our facade restoration initiative grant through the MEDC, we had a local facade grant program in place, only for a year, not for too long, but we did have a couple of projects that happened through that program. And one of them that was awarded was to Donkers to do some exterior improvements to their property, including the windows, like resealing of the windows, replacement of their doors, replacement of the transom underneath the display windows, and then painting of their back deck. And that project has been ongoing. I mean, it was back in 2018 that we approved that project, and then that local facade grant program kind of took a back burner to our bigger program that we were implementing through the MEDC. However, I have been contacted by Jen Ray. They're looking to finish that project here this spring and would be looking for the $2,800 that the DDA had awarded them for that grant. So there was not any expiration or a deadline necessarily in that paperwork, just that it had to be completed in a reasonable time frame. So in the absence of a deadline, even though it's been a few years now that they've been doing this, I do feel as though we need to move forward and provide them that reimbursement of the $2,800 once this project is completed.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's the smart thing to do, the right thing to do probably. So I can definitely say that's a good move. Anyone got questions for Becky on anything else?
I would also add to that I would like to see that local facade improvement program reinstated within this next fiscal year. I think it was very important to provide that additional incentive and support for property owners downtown who are looking to make some improvements, you know, albeit smaller scale than what we've been able to provide through the facade restoration program, but still to provide some financial support, I think is important. So I would look to budget that for next year.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, especially with this hopefully redoing the bond and maybe freeing up a little bit of money. I think it's something we need to do to help give back to the community. I think it's definitely one of our missions here with the DDA.
And just historically speaking, the DDA board did designate $30,000 to that program back in 2018. So I would look to do a similar amount moving forward.
Well, it's your job to find the money, Becky. Come on.
I know, I'm trying.
Well, perfect.
I also want to talk to Mike more about that stimulus money the city's receiving.
There you go. We should get a portion of that.
Conveniently, he's on the phone right now, so that'll have to be a separate conversation.
Mr. Hollywood. Okay. Anyone else questions for Becky? Becky, was there anything else?
No, that's okay. Hang on. Hey, did I miss something?
No, not anything important.
Okay.
We want some stimulus money.
Yeah, stimulus money.
All right. Yeah, right.
We'll talk more.
I can't even spend that where I want to spend it.
Okay. Moving past the director's report then, public comment. I'm assuming we have no one in the waiting room, right?
Correct.
That's correct.
Perfect. Thanks, Sean and Becky. Sue Holiday, who was on her call, she put in the chat, I'll just read it for the record. It says, thank you for your consideration of the display of pride flags for our procession in the Place of Pride Festival, which is at Matson Lower Harbor. You've made the LGBTQ plus 1A community feel Marquette welcome and safe. And I remind you, the City Commission has made June Pride Month. So keep that thought there. And thank you, Sue, for your comment. No one else for public comment. I guess we'll get to board member comment and get out of here. I'll start with Nicole, since you're first on my screen.
I think that we had a really good, lively discussion the past couple of meetings, and I'm happy to see the interaction from all of us. And I just wanted to say I really look forward to Ordock's plans. I also frequent their business often, like Jeremy said, and I think it'd be really nice to have some more outdoor space. If COVID's taught us anything, it's utilizing that space that we have outside. And I think it's a good way for them to kind of compete with Black Rocks too, to offer more seating as well to increase their business. And looking forward to Restaurant Week next week. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Eric, how about you?
Nothing from me. Good meeting, good discussion on a lot of those topics. I agree with Nicole, but nothing further from me.
Thank you, sir. Tony?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one announcement for me. I plan on retiring this year, so sometime in June, I'll submit a formal resignation.
We're going to miss you.
Congratulations.
Must be
Yeah,
nice. Rob, how about you?
No additional comments, thanks.
Awesome. Mark.
Sorry, still on mute. Nothing further.
Okay. Megan.
No comments.
Great. Mike, did you want to say anything before we leave? Good. He's good to go. I don't really have any comments other than great discussion once again on everything to do with flags. Everything else, I think the Ordock trying to move forward with this plan is a great one. I do worry about that parking lot over there though. And hopefully we can figure out some parking issues. I don't know. Parking is going to be a problem moving forward. I know that we're going to continue having these discussions about how to solve it, and especially as the pandemic moves forward and ends, hopefully, once we are all hopefully vaccinated and stuff gets back to a little bit more normalcy. I think we're going to get back into parking being a lot more of a problem in Marquette than what we seem to remember pre-pandemic. So my fears are there. I know I'm looking forward to continuing this TIF discussion in 2 weeks. Super important. I hope everyone can be there. This is something that, you know, since I've started on the board has been issue 1A that we've been kind of fighting for and trying to figure out. So I applaud Becky for taking the steps to do this. And I look forward to being able to finally capture those funds on 3rd Street somehow, because it's a need given how large our budget is. So other than that, I appreciate you guys all being here and being so willing to participate. It's been awesome. And I look forward to our next meeting. Have a great day.